everybody, and welcome to another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, moms and dads. I'm Dr. Dejana, and I'm here with Dr. Leah. And today's topic, Leah, is...
Well, I'm calling it self-discipline, but I understand there's going to be a little pushback on that topic. But really, it's meant to be very practical, hands-on for parents. Like now, okay, you're the educator, you're the parent, you're all of these roles that can be very complicated. And what can we do on a practical level to help you guide this conversation and these decisions with your kids? Like, what do we need to do? When do we need to do it? What are best practices? And I know you're going to push back, Dejana, so go ahead.
It's one of those things. The word discipline, for some reason, it rubs me the wrong way. So I always like to reframe or reimagine what I'm talking about. And so I like to use the word guidance, like self-guidance or guidance. What type of guidance would you like to do? And there's so many different ways of thinking when it comes to discipline and guidance, but it's super important as a parent to find one that works well for you and also recognizes your child and what's going to work best for your child.
Right, because what we're really trying to do is help them make good decisions, right? It's really, and I think the word discipline gives everybody at least a little cringe feeling because it is something that was done to us for the most part as children, as opposed to engaging with the children to help them make good decisions that keep them out of trouble. And so then, like, when do you start? Because our pedagogy at 2-Bit Circus Foundation is let the child lead, basically, right? Let the child lead in the projects, let the child get them engaged in what you want them studying, and then be the facilitator instead of the person giving them all the answers or showing them all the right ways to do it. How do we apply that to the topic of teaching kids responsibility and engaging with them on decision making? Should we introduce our panel and invite them to comment?
Absolutely. I'm happy to introduce our team of expert panelists. I'm going to start off with Dr. Marcella Klein Williams is joining us again. An accomplished leader, Williams' strengths include organizational development, systems design, and strategic partnerships. She has led an impressive career in both teaching and administration within the P20, that's preschool through graduate level, California education system. Previously, she served as the regional director of the Ventura County Office of Education and as Chief Education Officer for California STEM Learning Network. Welcome again to our panel, Dr. Marcella Klein Williams. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ann Mcmullen. So happy to have you again. Ann is an education consultant based in Los Angeles, California, who works throughout the United States and internationally as a public speaker, writer, and consultant focused on leadership. Ann is a frequent speaker at state and national conferences. She currently serves as project director for COSIN Empowered Superintendents Program. An acclaimed author of life lessons in leadership, we're so glad to have Ann join us for this show. Next up, I'd like to introduce Jamie Wagner. Jamie is a 5th grade teacher and math specialist at her school. She has did I read that right? Triple master's degrees in psychology, education, and marriage and family therapy. She applies all those degrees as a teacher, a therapist, and especially as a parent and a wife. Thank you so much, Jamie, for being a part of this conversation. I'd also like to introduce Mark Riddle. Mark has a PhD in sociology from the University of California and currently serves as the University Director of Educational Effectiveness for West Coast University, an institution dedicated to educating healthcare professionals. Mark lives at the end of the LAX runways with Stacy and their 2 cats. Let's welcome all of our panelists. I hope you guys are well prepared to answer this question. What does this look like? 2-Bit Circus Foundation, we want the kids to lead the way, but what type of tools do they need to be equipped with in terms of self-discipline and responsibility in order to take the lead and actually lead the way? Who should we hear from first, Leah?
Oh, I think we should ask Jamie to chime in on this since she's in the middle of it all.
Yes, both at home and in the classroom. I think one of the most important things is, like you said, giving the kids a chance to be in charge of it, or at least be an active participant in what kind of guidance or discipline is going on. And I don't have a problem with the word discipline, because for me, it's about building a work ethic and as an ability to self-regulate. And that's the discipline I think of, not sort of punishment or something like that, but the idea of building your own self-regulatory system. So for kids, having them build the understanding that the way life is a result of the choices one makes. And so when my kids make not great choices, like my son throwing a tantrum in the kitchen, and I say, okay, well, the consequence is that because you're throwing this tantrum, we can't have free screens because I just don't think you're ready for it right now, then he has to realize that it's his choices to react in that way, that he can be upset and he can be frustrated and he can even be angry with me, but it's the way you express those things that make a difference in how your situation is resolved and where you can be. So in our house, a lot of the time, and this happened in their preschool as well, is that the teacher and I often say, okay, well, what choices did you make? How did we end up here? And who should you be upset with right now? Should you be upset with me because I'm holding the line that we agreed to earlier? Or should you be upset with yourself for making a choice you knew would result in this sort of action? So I think having clear boundaries where the consequence or result of an action is not a surprise, but it's very clear that when this happens, this is the result, then children get a chance to make the choices and to see that they have the ability to affect change in their environment. And that starts at home.
Yeah,
Wow.
Leah, I just agree with what Jamie said so much. I think the idea of consequences is very important. And I think in Jamie's case, she said, all right, you did this and then this happened. Other times we have to explain, if you do this, then this could be the result. Is this what you want to do? But I think it's really important to make that connection. I think also, Leah, when you talked about what you do at 2-Bit Circus and how you encourage that creativity, within that, there's still structure. And so there's a way and a process. We want you to be free. We want you to be creative. But these are some things you need to keep in mind. And I think those two things are really critical to help with whether it's self-discipline or self-regulation or whatever word we're going to use for that. I think those two are right on the mark for that. So thank you. Jamie, I appreciate your thinking on that.
Thank you, Anne. Mark, are you in need of any discipline at this point?
I could definitely use somebody to chime in. As a longtime band nerd, I too, and maybe there may be some generational stuff going on here too, of course, because I'm 120 years old. But that the notion of discipline for the band nerd is, you have to put in the hours to get the sound, to get the performance, to get the whole thing running the way it's supposed to. And that requires discipline. So, I think, so I don't have trouble with that topic either. I think I appreciated what you said about the 2-Bit Circus approach, which is largely problem-based. I think about all the years that I spent doing youth ministry, and we'd essentially take a group of kids and put them in a place where they were challenged to help some people. But during that time, they had to make a bunch of decisions. A bunch of problems would arise, and they'd have to figure out, how to delay gratification, how to accept responsibility, how to handle the truth, how to preserve the integrity of their decisions and their own autonomy while collaborating on projects and stuff like that. And when I compared the kids that were in my youth group to, kids that were dealing with their probation officers, I think that this, the method largely worked. That whole, to solve problems, you have to dig in. You have to be willing to endure, to set a pace, to think on your feet, just to get to the other side of that project and be happy about it.
Good point. Marcella, how are you?
I
like the word or no?
What's that?
Do you like the word discipline or no? We're like 50-50 here.
Oh, come on. I love the word discipline. it speaks to me. I think one of the things is I supervise 30 young adults, and oftentimes they look at somebody in my seat with crow's feet and gray hair, and they think that all of the things that I do just come naturally. And I try to make visible for them all of the tricks I have up my sleeve to get myself to do the things that I don't really want to do. So to set a timer for myself, or to have a treat, that I have to do this first in order to do that next. And I think about, I'm not in the business anymore of raising children. Is that all of my oldest child is even past 40 years of age.
Yeah, we made all our mistakes, right?
Right.
They're adults now.
And my youngest is mid-30s now. So, they're kind of flown and grown. But I'm at the other side of that, where I have elderly parents, and I have to kind of convince them into directions that I might need them to be in. So I rely on, it's actually kind of motivational theory. It's Detchy and Ryan. So there's 3 big pieces. So autonomy, they have to be able to know that they get to make the decision. Relatedness, if you can add some sort of connection to other people in it, that's very motivating. And then competence, and they have to feel like it's something that they can actually do, that it's within their sphere. Because a lot of times when you're looking at when things are imploding, it could be because they're overwhelmed by it, or they don't believe in their own ability to do those things. And that's where kind of what you guys were talking about earlier, that really helps. How do you chunk it out? How do you make it into the bite-sized pieces that they need? So it's interesting, at this stage of my life, those strategies that I used when my children were young and I was helping to shape their habits and patterns. And so much of it was based on, I don't really care what they're going to do right now, because I'm not always going to be there. It's at, how do I provide the support to them so they'll make good decisions later? So much of it was getting them to kind of, how do you do that thinking on their own? And then this is a party trick that I teach the Illumineers. So those are student workers at the college, at Oxnard College, where I work at. So here's the party trick. It's kind of interesting. Is if you try to ask somebody to look at me and now count backwards by 9s from 100. And as soon as they are cognitively engaged, their eyeballs go up. So if when you're disciplining a child, and you're saying, look at me when I'm talking to you, then what you know for sure, they're not reflecting. And
We lost your sound, Marcella. Oh, it looks like we lost Marcella's connection, perhaps. But
Yes.
That's a really good point. And one of the things that Marcella said that really triggered a memory for me was when my granddaughter was about 9 and she was in trouble for something, and we were driving along, and I said something to the effect that, yeah, I remember when I was your age making mistakes and getting in trouble. And she said, Nana, you did things wrong. Like, it's important that they understand that we weren't born where we are now, that we evolved and that we learned from our mistakes. And I said to her recently that the important thing is that you don't make the same mistake over and over. We will all make mistakes from time to time, and we'll learn from each mistake, but you just have to try and not make the same one over and over.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So it looks like pretty much we have a win for team discipline. And I'm on team guidance. And I think really my only issues with that word is, you use discipline. A quick search would say it's the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior. But it also says using punishment to correct disobedience. And oftentimes in my work, I have seen punishment used to correct disobedience without guiding and giving tools so the learning part doesn't happen, that guidance part of like, this is what was wrong, this is why, and let's reflect. And can you give me tools so that I won't do that again? And so one of the things that I like to do in my house, and we practice this all the time, is each one of my children, we go through what's called our toolbox. And this is our social emotional toolbox that can help guide our behavior with one another. So the kids have a breathing tool, meaning that they know that when they're upset, they can calm down and they can be in charge of themselves and calm themselves down. Whatever it is that they're dealing with. They have a quiet or a safe space tool if they need to take time away and have a safe space. They know that they have the ability to do that. They know when they should be using their listening tool. Like, maybe this is a situation where I need to just be quiet and listen. There's an empathy tool as well. I know there's a lot. Like, there's an empathy tool. I'm feeling this way, but let me think about how the other person might be feeling about this situation before I get into a conflict. Personal space tool. Everybody has the right to their own personal space. Using words, not yet, like, how do we communicate effectively? There's also the garbage can tool that I love, because sometimes things happen and you just got to toss that experience in the trash. Like, let it go, let it go. One of my favorite tools, my daughter's favorite tool, is the please and thank you. She found that that helps solve all sorts of problems with her siblings. Can you please do this and thank you? There's also the apology and forgiveness tool. Like, sometimes you're in a situation where you're in the wrong and you can admit that you made a mistake and ask for forgiveness. That's okay. The patience tool, and then my favorite, the courage tool. Like, you have the courage to do the right thing. Like, you can stand up and say, that's wrong, I'm going to do the right thing. So that's kind of how we format our guidance here.
I want your toolbox. I want one of those.
It's not mine. I took it from another organization a couple years ago, but I find that it works really, really well. And we can talk about, like, I think you need to examine your toolbox. And then they know, like, oh, let me reset and think about how I want to handle this situation. So I think it's really important to equip children with the tools so that when we do, formulate a code of conduct or rules or behavior, like, they're equipped with tools so that they can make better decisions in different situations. Kind of cool.
So Dejana, also, I see behind you is the new STEAM lab that you have in your workspace. And I wonder, will you have a series of rules and code of conduct for working in the STEAM lab?
Probably, yes, definitely, yes. There will definitely be some expectations, and we'll probably come together as a family, because this space is here, and make them together. I've also found when you do come up with a code of conduct or rules or some sort of agreements, it's really good to involve all of the parties that are going to be required to abide by these agreements. And then that makes it easier. Like, wait, we all agreed, all of us came together, and these are our agreements. So don't be surprised when we call you out on missing one of our agreements, because those are all together.
What a great idea. It reminds me of Cider House Rules, where when the group that came to pick the apples saw the rules, the Cider House Rules, their reaction was, those aren't our rules. We didn't make them. So, well, who wants to crack our knuckles? How bad are we? How wrong are we on these ideas? And Marcella, thank you. We're glad you're back. We lost you in the middle of a statement. If you want to finish that, then please do.
Hanging on it. Anyhow, the point I was trying to make is, a lot of times when we kind of demand you have to look directly at me, we're not giving people space to be reflective and thinking on their own. So the only thing they can do in that space is really feel like they have to agree. And when you want something that's kind of a lasting change, you have to let them kind of think about it on their own and come to it. And I think one of the things that I'm glad as a mother I practiced when my children were younger, because it served me well. They deserve privacy, and they deserve to always maintain their dignity. So when I'm working with my elderly parents, it's the same thing. They deserve privacy, and they always deserve to maintain their dignity. And in working with others, if you can kind of keep that in mind as people are coming to these, rougher spots, is how do you make it easy for them to, I love what Dejana had said, to go into their toolbox and kind of figure out those next steps. So whenever I get to a really tough spot with, anybody that I'm working with, but reflecting when my children were young, or thinking about, big decisions when my parents are older, I always think of those three things. So autonomy, do they have any decision? How can I create a decision for them? Competence, do they feel like there's something that they can actually do, that they can shine in? And then relatedness, how is it connected to their relationships with others?
Really great ideas here, and a lot of overlap and similarities in what Dejana was saying about engaging the kids in the decision-making process about the rules. And I like Jamie was talking earlier about that they know here's if this rule is broken, here's the consequence. And so that they, as they're making those decisions, they know what they're risking. All right, so we're not in any trouble right now. We're good. We can.
Can I add one other thought to it? Is that I think as an educator, I'm always adding things to my list that I'm awful at. So like, if you know me, you know that I was taking tap dancing lessons like a year and a half ago. I have no talent at it, but it was just kind of like, how could I have that kind of stick-to-itiveness and persistence to keep trying at something that I positively am awful at? So right now that we're in, kind of stay at home and can't go out as much, the newest thing that I've added is playing the piano. I think my family might boot me out at some point because in order to use the app, everybody has to hear it. My son came down. He's like, have you ever considered trying it this way instead? Which I think is this idea of this is really painful to listen to. But at least what they're getting is that it's those daily decisions, kind of doing things, one bit at a time and building on it. And I think it's important for learners to see that we're not always good at everything we're doing. We just kind of keep biting away at it.
I agree. I think that's super important for us to model that we're not experts at everything, and that it takes diligence and persistence to move forward. Absolutely. I can't express how important that is, but I also recognize that sometimes it's difficult for adults to be transparent about that. It can be challenging.
Yeah, being vulnerable with the, especially depending on how many children you have. If the children outnumber the adults, then you really need to work on this system so that you don't have a mutiny on your hands. I was a single mom with 2 kids, so I was outnumbered from the get-go. There's no way around it. I know, Dejana, you have 3 kids, 2 adults, so you've got your challenges there. But having buy-in from the kids, and I think if they feel respected in the process and know, again, my granddaughter had an experience recently where she was in trouble, and she said to me, I'm not mad at mommy. I'm not mad at daddy. I'm really mad at myself. I knew better. Like, okay, that lesson's learned. I don't know whether it sticks for the next time, but she's, yeah. And when I asked her what she had done, she said, it's too embarrassing. So if she's embarrassed about it, there's a good chance she won't repeat that particular mistake. There will be other, probably even better ones coming down the pike, but that one, I think she has managed her way through it. So, and Mark, by the days of ministry, like youth ministry, you must have come up against, because I don't, like, some kids are sent to youth ministry as an alternative to probation.
No, I mean, most of the kids wanted to be there, but especially their parents wanted them to have the experience of dealing with other human beings that weren't them, right? Because as much as we think of ourselves as role models as parents, kids cue off other kids too. And when they see that the kind of determination that several of the folks in the panel have talked about paying off, among their peers, that's a powerful message that they don't necessarily get straight away from their parents. Their parents are parents, for God, it's just like, whatever. But when they see that, that's those same kinds of problem solving techniques and whatnot, Dejana's toolbox, or I think of Paul Gallico's The Man Who Is Magic. He had a magic box that he, recommended, for the people in his little world there. When they see peers exercising those same kinds of decision-making skills, that's powerful, I think,
right.
and easier for kids to reenact then.
Yeah, and when they see others making the mistakes that they've made, there's something reassuring as well about, I'm not alone in this challenge.
Yeah.
What about, I'm going to ask, like, at the end of everything now, I'm going to ask you probably the most charged question about raising children. What about spankings? What about striking the child?
Well, I am happy to weigh in on that. So I raised men. So some of it was just a strategy viewpoint, is that they were going to be bigger than I was far too soon. So if that was my strategy, that wasn't going to be one that's going to pay off over time. And then when I didn't want to yell at them. So if I got really quiet, that's when they knew that there was a huge problem coming. But if those weren't in my toolbox, then I had to have other things. So if things went poorly at McDonald's and it was something they were looking forward to, we're out.
Right?
Yeah.
And you also raised a couple of young men. What was
did.
your philosophy on that?
I think as adults, we've always got to model the behavior we want our children to live by, and therefore hitting other people when something doesn't go right. I was trying to think back on that because, like Marcella, mine are also quite grown now. So it's been a few years. I don't know if as tiny little ones, when they can't reason, if you kind of tap their hand or something, but beyond that, no, I had not really been in favor of that. The other thing that never really worked is when you ask a child to do something and the reason is because I said so. There's got to be a little more rationale than that, which is why I love Dejana's toolbox. And where were you 30 years ago when I was raising kids?
You do want copies of that.
That is just marvelous, because what you're doing there is you're shaping their behavior, but you're really doing it one step at a time. We focus on this, then we focus on that. And I just love the way you have pulled that all together. But no, Leah, not a big fan of spanking or physical hitting in any way.
So, and Jamie, this is like really in your wheelhouse in terms of psychology and working with children.
I think a lot of that sort of goes back to what Marcella was saying about allowing everybody dignity in this situation. And I think as soon as you introduce corporal punishment, you've made a real hierarchy there and you've taken away the dignity of the child. I think that's what you've lost. Are there times in my life when I think, oh man, she'd learn this lesson or he'd learn this lesson faster if I just clobbered her once? Yes. But it's not how you want, at least not how we want our kids to feel. We don't want them to be afraid of us. And so they obey the rules because they're afraid of us. And one thing that I learned,
self-discipline worked in there.
There you go. One of the things that I learned that I profoundly changed the way I dealt with kids and teaching and my own children in my household is the idea of there being a reptilian brain, that your brain is the reptilian part is here. And that's the part that we share with all sorts of reptiles and primitive species. And this is just our fight or flight and all of that sort of stuff. And the younger you are, the more this controls everything. And as you get older, the cerebellum gets over there and we have all this reasoning we can do. But this part right here is what's activated when my kids start to panic. So when my 6-year-old is throwing a tantrum, the louder I get, the louder he gets. And if I can get down to eye level with him and just look at him and say, I hear you. I hear you're upset. I hear that you're frustrated by this. I hear that you don't want to have that for snack and you'd rather have something else. So as long as he feels heard, eventually he calms down and can tell me what's going on. And I can say, I understand that that's what you want. That's not what you're going to get right now. So instead, we're going to have this for snack, but I hear you and understand what you're saying. And that way, he's not always happy, but at least he knows that I heard him and my decision was based on what I felt it should be based on.
Well, I think there's a lot to think about in this, and thank you for that, Jamie. Dejana, I mean, this is a deep subject.
We could probably do a deep dive. I want to hear more from Jamie and some advice on how we can take that that lesson and apply it to preteens and teenagers when their brains change.
Right. Well, it's time for us to say goodbye. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank each of our panelists for being here. And Dejana, you want to take us out?
Well, what can I say? Stay strong. Remember, you're bigger than they are. We can do it together. I hope you guys join us again for another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. I'm Dr. Dejana, and that's Dr. Leah, and we're signing out.
Thank you.
Yay.